Welcome to the PlantFit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Teri Mosey. Teri is an international speaker, consultant, and health supportive chef. With over 20 years experience in the health and wellness industry, Teri has created a way to use relationship with food as a pathway for personal growth, leading to sustainable, long-term healing and change. We start the conversation with Teri sharing about what holistic nutrition means. Enjoy the presentation.
It's a great question. And holistic nutrition is looking at, first of all, it's about looking at everything that's happening in the world, within our body, and then in food, in a fashion where everything is considered part of a network. So when we start to look at the world from a holistic perspective, we're taking in everything and realizing everything is connected. So the definition of holistic is wholeness. So that when we're looking at the body, we're looking at the body as a whole. So the sum of its parts, not just the isolated parts. And what that basically means is that you're looking at someone from their body, mind, and soul all the time. So we have a physical body. We also have an energetic being, and then we also are spiritually a soul. And each aspect of us actually is entangled and enmeshed in the other. So when you make changes in your physical body, it alters your energetic being. If you make changes in your energetic being, it's going to be prominent in your soul. Okay, so everything is connected, and we're finding that the entire body's network works that way. So that when you're even looking at different operations in the body, so sometimes we like to separate systems, like the cardiovascular system, the endocrine system, the digestive system. But what we're learning now is that all those systems are intertwined and playing together. So that, for instance, our brain is not just hanging out up in our head. We have brain cells that are running up and down our spine, but we also have them inside our digestive system. We call it our enteric or our second brain. They are laced all over our immune cells, making it our floating brain. So as we start to learn more about the body, is that we're learning that it's holistic in fashion, meaning that every single part is connected. And then that works with food as well. Right? So when we talk about food, we get wrapped up in how many calories is in that, or how much protein is in that. Oh, those carbs, that's what makes me fat, right? So we get all wrapped up in the calories and the physical nutrients of food. When we take a holistic view, we look at food past the calorie, past the nutrient of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and we start looking at all the intricacies of what's happening behind that. So what we can find is that behind those physical components are also energetic characteristics of food, as well as even how we behave around food. So our conditioned beliefs and behaviors around food, how we like to eat, so our eating environments, to the different types of foods that we choose, all of that wrapped together impacts whether you're going to digest and assimilate food. Okay, because we get into this tendency where we go, oh, well, I need to take in 50 grams of protein. I need X amount of calories. And we're just looking at that food physically on a plate. That food on a plate is not what it is once it goes through your digestive system and then interacts with you. So what we're looking at with food from a holistic perspective is we're asking, how does food nourish me, body, mind, and soul? And then how can I use my relationship with food in order to not only heal from perhaps a physical ailment, maybe we have a hormone imbalance, but also in order to be a way of life, as well as a pathway for our own evolution. Because in a holistic standpoint, how you eat is a reflection of who you are and how you are living. And it's really personal, right? Have you ever spoken to somebody about their food? And they get really annoyed or a little defensive if you say something that's not aligned with their food beliefs, right? Because you are challenging an aspect of who they are and not necessarily just about their food, because their food and that relationship is just a reflection of who they are on their deepest level. Does that make sense? So there's a whole world to holistic nutrition that's not just about looking at the food on your plate.
And
I also understand, obviously you mentioned how food impacts the other levels, but I also understood that the other levels work backwards to how we assimilate food or how we digest and how much nutrition we get out of it, or how it impacts our body in a sense.
Right. So when the last thing that happens is on a physical level, so everything that's going to be determining what happens on a physical level comes back from an origin that's energetic. Okay, so anything that happens on a physical level starts in our consciousness. So it's a thought first, which creates an emotion, which is a messenger that allows our body to feel what we're thinking. And it's the same thing with food. When we're taking in that physical food, we're also really taking in the energetic essence and its interaction with our energetic body. So it's different than what is the mainstream of counting calories and nutrients, but it also allows us to encompass all of who we are. And that is what leads to long-term change and healing. Otherwise, it's temporary, right? People go on diets and 95% of them gain the weight back in a year and then some, because they never went deep enough into the deep layers of who they are to make change. So in order for us to actually understand the power of food, we need to dig a little bit deeper.
Speaking of the power of food, you mentioned earlier about the energy of food and energetic foods. So can you define that? Because is it raw foods versus cooked foods versus animal-based foods? How do you define the energy of certain foods?
Well, different foods have a different energetic essence that are based on some of its qualities. So sure, some of it is on how it is grown. Some of it is in innate qualities, such as their flavors. So the flavor of food, actually, it's not the same as taste. So taste is what allows our food to taste good, but it's not the same as flavor. Flavor is actually an intrinsic factor that nourishes specific physical organs in our body. So flavor is one. Food also has what's called a thermal nature, where energetically it will either warm or cool you. Okay, foods also have what are called moistening or drying effects, and all of that is happening on an energetic level, right? It's not something that I can physically present in front of you, kind of like an emotion, right? I can't give you a bowl of joy or a bowl of sadness, but it has an energetic essence and it carries that. And it's the same thing with food. We may not be able to put all of these characteristics of food on your plate so you can visually see them with your naked eye, but they do exist.
Let's dive into the hormone subject, because you mentioned how that correlates with the food that we eat, and I would love to find out a bit more on, like how hormones impact our overall well-being and how this whole holistic perspective is influencing the hormones as well.
Yeah, so hormones is a great topic because it seems that as the years go on, more people are prevalent with having hormone issues, and becomes, well, what is that all about? And one of the major things is that we live in a society that's always on the go, right? So we live a life of excess as just a main society, and we're not really that grounded in our lives. So what that does is it ends up impacting what's called our HPA stress axis. So that when we start talking about hormone imbalances, we can talk about ones that are maybe in our reproductive function, right? People want to talk about why my testosterone is low, why my estrogen is high, why my thyroid is off. And it brings us all back to one conversation. And it comes back to us having a conversation about stress. Okay, so when it's because all of these different hormones are intertwined and play together. So if we were to talk about cortisol, right, he's that big enemy. Everyone thinks like he's what makes us fat. And, the reality is sure, he's part of our stress axis, but he also is not an actual villain. So cortisol plays roles in our cognitive function, plays roles in our nutrient metabolism, plays roles in our immunity. What happens with hormone imbalances, like anything else in the body, is that it's all a network. So when your cortisol goes up, then your adrenaline hormones go up, and then your insulin goes off. and then you're not regulating your blood sugars very well, your metabolism goes off a little bit, you have a hormone called leptin in your fat cells that now is causing some resistance, so weight's holding on a little bit more, you start to become moody, right? So you're wired and tired, and your exercise reaches a plateau, you don't sleep well, right? Like, so we start having all these cascade of events, and understanding with these hormone imbalances is that it's a network. Everything is working together. And we can tie it all back to the stress axis. And this is what's so amazing about the most current mind-body physiology research that we've been doing, as well as the world of quantum physics, which just came about the last 100 years, so it's kind of an infant, is that everything that happens inside our mind is going to end up modifying our physical body. So that for every thought we have, it creates a specific biochemical inside the body that goes down to the body so that you can feel what you're thinking. And then you have another thought, and then it has you feel that way, right? So if you have angry thoughts, you get all angry. You're very happy, you have a happy physical feeling. They're tied together, right? So the most frequent thoughts you have every day create your state of being. And then that creates the hormonal secretions that are happening in your body that physically modify who you are. So when we start to see imbalances in our hormones, that's the last draw. Anything that physically manifests is the last step. Okay? So any changes in our chemistry, our biology, our neurocircuitry of our brain, to our genetic expression, all is being led by our consciousness. So consciousness is what comes first, and then everything physical within our body, all those processes will follow. So it's about going back to that space of understanding how everything is connected, and that's the holistic world, is that the mind and body are connected. We can go back to traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic practices, and what did they say? That the best healer is the mind.
Yeah, you mentioned the HPA axis, if I understood that correct. This is what does that stand for? Maybe you could explain more of, obviously, so the mind influences, maybe some other factors people could look out for that influences the stress axis.
Sure, the stress axis, the HPA, so H is hypothalamic, P is the pituitary, and A is the adrenal. So it's different glands in your body, which are the master controls, that secrete different hormones in response to how you react to a situation. So stress is really what we perceive it to be. It's not an actual fact, and it's subjective, right? So we can all be in the same room and you can get scared about something and I can go, what's the matter with you, right? So some people really like scary movies and some people will cry because we all have a different perception of what is considered scary. And that's because we all live our own specific life. So here's the thing, is we take in over 400 billion bits of information every second. And only 2,000 bits gets into your awareness. You choose those 2,000 bits. So that's why when we all go to the same show, we read the same book, we travel to the same place, we all have a completely different experience. Because your reality is your personal reality. And that's where your hormone excretions and your state of being come from, is your personal reality that you choose to have. It's what you choose to place your attention on. So the first thing I would suggest to people is to become aware of what their 2,000 bits are. What are they placing their attention on? If you walk outside today and you feel a life full of gratitude, then you're going to find things to be grateful for everywhere you go. If you think people are really kind, even when we're experiencing some troubles in the world, you're going to find kindness in this world. But if you leave and think that everything is dark and gray and people are selfish, you're going to meet every rude and disrespectful person that exists. They're going to cross your path because that's the 2,000 bits that you're placing your attention on. So that if we were to start to look at what can we do to start to shift our hormone imbalances, that would be my first thing to say, is to observe your thoughts. Where are your belief systems? What are you allowing that you're filtering in, and what are you keeping out? Because that automatically starts to change that HPA axis and then all your hormone secretions. And we haven't even gotten up off the chair yet. Just think, when you start to eat better, so eat a cleaner diet, you start to exercise, you start to sleep well, you begin meditating, boom, your whole life will change.
Speaking of holistic nutrition and speaking of eating better, based on your findings, how can food affect our HPA axis and what kind of food promotes optimal health and well-being?
Yeah, great question. And what we do is we're finding out the connections between our digestive system, because it is considered our second brain, how it impacts our state of mind and our emotions, which also helps to secrete different hormones. So we actually secrete 90% of our serotonin hormone inside our digestive system. And that's our calming happiness molecule. So when you have a happier digestive system, you have a happier state of mind, which means you have a calmer HPA axis. So one of the major things we would want to do is feed our microbiome. Okay, so we have bacteria all over us, right? So we're always so paranoid about germs and cooties, but the reality is we're designed to be part of an ecosystem. So we have bacteria everywhere, with about 4 to 5 pounds of bacteria inside your gut. And we need to feed that. It's our microbiome. It's our friendly bacteria that helps us digest food. It also helps us to produce hormones and vitamins that we need. And it helps us to keep out different viruses and parasites and all that kind of stuff too. So it's a part of our immunity. So when we take in those type of foods, we're looking at the best foods. We can take in prebiotic foods or probiotic foods. Now, prebiotic foods are the foods that actually feed the friendly bacteria. So the friendly bacteria has some favorite foods. It loves bananas. It likes raw garlic. It likes raw red onions. It likes Jerusalem artichokes. Dandelion greens, leeks. So these are all different foods that the microbiome likes to feed off of. Now, if we eat a plant-based diet, there's a small amount of prebiotics in all of those plant foods, so you don't have to get obsessive about it, like and start eating raw onions as if they're apples. Let's not take things out of context, right? We get a little extreme. Just be aware of the foods that are in your diet. And then there are probiotics, and probiotics are already fermented foods. So they are foods that already carry a cultured bacteria to help replenish and diversify your microbiome. I would recommend eating tempeh, having some miso, but I would make my own miso soup, because when you go to the restaurants, they use an excessive amount more salt and preservatives than you would want. But you can make your own, get some miso paste, because that's fermented. I would get some unpasteurized cultured sauerkraut. Kimchi is fabulous. You can also, now everybody's fermenting, so we can ferment beets, carrots, there's all different veggies that you can ferment. But when you're taking them in that fermented form, it's an extra boost, and it helps to diversify your population, because you don't want to just have one strain of friendly bacteria. You want to have multiple, because that's what allows you to be healthier. So the healthier your microbiome is, actually the more contained your HPA stress axis is.
So while we're on probiotics, many people subscribe to using probiotic supplements. Based on your findings, what's your take on having a probiotic supplement a day?
Yeah, my findings is that if you are in need of a quick repopulation of your digestive system, because say you were traveling and got traveler's diarrhea, got really, really ill, and you needed to replenish, I would recommend going on a probiotic supplementation for a small amount of time, usually about a week or so, because that's honestly what the supplement was designed for. And then people got lazy. And they would say, well, instead of really eating well, I'll just give me that pill, right? That psychological way of dismissing and playing a passive role in their health. And the problem is that does not allow us to nourish ourselves. Because when you take in the actual foods that have probiotics in them and the prebiotics in them, is that they also come with hundreds of other compounds in the most magical design of nature, so that we can actually absorb and assimilate. When we take something in a concentrated form, in a pill form, it doesn't work the same way inside the body as if we take it from a food form that's coming in this perfect innate design that allows us to extract what we need. Because remember, it's not just what you pop in. We need to be able to break it down, extract it, assimilate it, and use it. So whole plant-based foods allow us to do that because nature's already intricately made that design. So I would recommend in certain circumstances, but not as a blanket way of just not wanting to practice healthy eating.
Now, some might say, I love eating ice cream and that just makes me happy, right? And I guess that's like a short-term effect, but maybe what's your take on that from a holistic perspective?
Well, that's cute. It's sweet because we all do have emotional connections to food. And the reason why you like the ice cream is because it elicits an emotion. So when we have addictions to food, it's not the ice cream itself, it's the emotion that it elicits that you are seeking. And what I would say is if you wanted from a holistic perspective, it would ask you to explore that emotion that you're seeking, why it's lacking in your life, and what you can do to change that. Because what you're doing at that time is just basically numbing, and you're keeping yourself in survival mode instead of living. Okay, so there's a difference between surviving and living. And if you just keep feeding all your addictions, you keep yourself in a stagnancy space where you're not evolving. And that's why we're here, by the way. We're here for the evolution of our soul. And we do it through our physical body and our emotions and experiences that we have. If you want to just keep having that quick fix to deaden that need that you have in your life, you're never able to evolve. And then when we get stagnant, illnesses occur. So I'm not saying not to enjoy some ice cream once in a while, but if you're always looking to any form of addiction, it can be, to a food like ice cream, it can be to a person, it can be to booze, it could be to cigarettes, it can be to excessive exercise. That's a drug, by the way. People who exercise excessively, that's a drug, because you're looking for it to elicit a specific emotion and feeling that you're trying to create within you. Does that make sense? So there's a difference between enjoying something for a novel experience and then being attached to it. Life is about being detached, not that you don't care, but the art of detachment, if we go back to Buddhism.
So if someone is extremely attached to exercising or ice cream and having a craving for chocolate, what can you do based on your experience with your clients to short circuit that habitual pattern? Because if someone keeps doing it and they're an addict, they don't really know how to break out of that habit. Is there any tricks or tips?
Yeah, no tricks, but there's definitely tips. Here's the thing is that if you keep feeding that addiction, right, if you keep going for that addiction, what happens in what we know in neuroplasticity of how the brain works is that neurons that fire together wire together. Neurons that fire together more frequently fire together more strongly. So if you keep feeding that addiction, it gets harder and harder to break. So what we're trying to do is to lessen that, because also nerve cells that don't fire together no longer wire together. So our body is able to actually rewire. There's no such thing as you can't teach a dog, old dog new tricks, or, like, oh, I'm too old to learn. Everyone can revamp. You have to just really want it. This is what it comes down to, is you have to really want the change, because then you'll be willing to do something about it. And we all know if there's something that we really want, it becomes a priority, right? If you really want something, you're going to put it on your priority list and you're going to figure out how to do that. So you have to first want it, and then you have to be able to, in a way, sit in the craving. And I know it's really uncomfortable at first. It is emotionally hard. It can lead physical discomfort. But the longer that you can stay, the longer that you can hold out on that craving, you are lessening that neurocircuitry in your brain that has you in that attachment. So even if you can just do it for 5 minutes and then refocus again, and 5 minutes again. So what I usually say is that when somebody has this, and this is how I work with my clients, is that they all usually, by the way, are going to be on some type of meditation practice. So they also have some breathing techniques that I have taught them. But also is I need you just to interrupt it. So you're going to interrupt it, and I don't care if you do 10 jumping jacks, if you do 10 sun salutations, if you decide to do 20 burpees. I don't care, but I need you to I want you to take your attention off of the craving, and what you need to do is neurologically refocus on something else. It's best if you refocus on something that gives you pleasure. So we need to know what makes you happy. So if there's certain music, you go listen to some music. If you have a hobby that you like to do, or you like to go work out, you want to go for a run, do you want to go cook a meal, you want to call a friend, whatever's on your happy list, right? Whatever brings you pleasure. So when you're in that craving, you need to stop and observe and say, okay, I'm in this craving, because you want to almost distance yourself or take yourself out of the craving so you become like the witness or the observer and not just the person experiencing it. Okay, because that's part of us being the witness and us living as a soul. So you step out and you are able to see and go, okay, all right, I have this craving, I got it, and then you own it. And now you're going to refocus your attention intensely on something else. Again, it can be some burpees. It can be, whatever you want it to be that draws your attention away. And if you can do that 5 minutes at a time, refocus again if it comes back. If you make it to about 30 minutes, you're already rewiring your circuitry. Okay? And then if you keep doing that each time it comes up, it gets less and less. We all have had those cravings in our life. And there are ones that we can laugh at now that we no longer have that we once had. And it wasn't like we had to force ourselves. I don't want you to force yourself to not eat ice cream. Because you know what you're going to do? You're going to want it even more. And it's going to be the only thing you think about is ice cream. Because you're just obsessing about it and you're still firing those neural circuits. So the idea is to refocus onto something else. It's not about full force. It's about just allowing that emotion to come through, that addiction, and then reshifting to where you are present.
I also want to touch on one point that you just mentioned briefly in one of your previous comments, how what we feel and the stress axis and the food can affect the expression of genes. Which is a very new topic, and I would hope you could share a little bit more about that one and how we can actually influence the expression of genes and diseases that come out of it.
Yeah, oh my goodness, the world of epigenetics, it literally makes me smile because it's just so fun what we are learning. So here's the thing is, for so long we thought that our genes determined our destiny, right? So we were blaming everything that we didn't like about ourselves on our parents, our ancestors. I have my mom's hips, I have my dad's heart. Well, everything was their fault. And what happened is when we went through the Human Genome Project, which was basically to isolate and map the genome of the human so that we can know physically what made the human. And then ideally, could we cure diseases? What happens if we found that cancer gene? What happens if we found, the Parkinson's gene? Can we recode it and then cure people? So that was the goal. Unfortunately, we found out that our complexity is not in our genes, that we actually have the same amount of genes as a rodent. And now even with our recalculations that they keep doing with the future studies of epigenetics, we actually have the same amount as a worm. Okay, so we're a little bit more complex than a worm, right? So they were like, oops, this is not good. But you know what? We learn from everything that we do, and they were doing the best they could at the time, but it enhanced and allowed us to step into the study of what's called epigenetics, and that's of genetic expression. And what we know is our environment is what turns our genes on. Genes are not what are called self-emergent. So they don't just turn on and off by themselves. They actually need a stimulus or a trigger that then tells them what to do, and then they respond. Okay? So this trigger can come in the form of our thoughts. It comes in the form of our emotions. It comes in the form of our nutrition. It comes in the form of our exercise, how well we sleep, our management of stress. So all these different environmental triggers that are coming from the outside world as well as internally within us, what they do is they then send a stimulus to the cells, which then have these receptor antennas that respond, send the messages through proteins into the cell, to the nucleus, to the DNA, and then they respond. They are expressed in response to the environment. How cool is that? So that you are in the driver's seat. Okay, you get to determine what genes are going to be expressed and for how long. And they're continuously changing, and we're learning all these amazing things. We know that if you just go and start laughing and go to a comedy show for an hour, that you can alter over 25 genes that are expressed for regulating your blood sugar levels. We actually regulate our blood sugar levels, our metabolism, our weight, literally by laughing. How amazing is that? And now we're recognizing that certain foods, primarily plant-based foods, and this is why there's such an emphasis now to go plant over animal, because we also just know so much more. And also animals are not the same as they were for our ancestors. So it's just a completely different scenario. But plants have what are called phytonutrients. So these are plant-based compounds that actually we're finding either directly or indirectly impact the expression of our genes. And a larger portion of them are found in the colors of the food. So that's why you hear people say, eat a rainbow diet. Yeah, sure, it's pretty and it's good aesthetically because that does help digestion, but because within those deep colors are these biochemicals that actually express our genes for health. And when they do that, they also silence genes for cancer. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned already blood sugar, cancer, any other common problems that would be affected?
Heart disease, which is the #1 killer, is huge. So when we start to shift, heart disease is within our control. It's not genetic. There's about 1 to 2% that they say is genetic within the heart disease world. And by the way, about 90 to 95% of all illnesses is not related to genetics itself, but related to genetic expression. And this is what we're finding out as the more research is done. And that's what's kind of nice, is because we don't have to be the fate of our genes. They're a platform that we got so that we could build a life off of. And they are one possibility. But here's the thing is, if all of us had heart disease, it would be a completely different genetic expression for all of us. It's not the same exact genes. It's a mixture. So if you were to start eating a plant-based diet and to start to get on an exercise regimen, within 90 days, you can alter over 500 genes that are expressed towards heart disease for the protection of heart disease. How amazing is that? So we're in the driver's seat.
It truly is amazing that food can affect genes. And while we're on food, can food actually affect emotions as well?
Yes, because the different foods that we take in also elicit different responses. So for instance, I'll give you an example, cashews. So if you were to take cashews in on an empty stomach, they actually release serotonin. So that is that happiness calming hormone that we have in our digestive system, primarily in our digestive system, and it's the primarily portion of antidepressants. So cashews are actually considered nature's antidepressant. So the different foods you take in can be calming or excitable, right? So when we take in a lot of stimulants, that also interacts with our hormones and makes us more nervous and anxious than if we're taking in calming foods. Walnuts, almonds, oatmeal, those are also very calming foods. So there are foods that do elicit a different emotional response in your body.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you already mentioned how the ancient teachings of Ayurveda or even Chinese medicine, they had some of these concepts incorporated, and we're learning now through science how they affect us in modern life. So maybe if you could share some of the interesting findings that you also incorporate in your practice that either come from Chinese medicine or Ayurveda.
Yeah, this is what's kind of fun about where we are in this world of technology, is because we're not only able to validate what has been known for thousands of years in these traditional medicine systems, is that we also can expand and learn, and that's what all our new mind-body physiology, quantum physics. So our world of energy now is just really incredible thanks to the technology that modern science has afforded us. So what I would say is that what I bring into mind is understanding that we are energy first and physical last. And so when I start to work with somebody from an energetic perspective, or bringing in those more ancient teachings, is I bring in first the idea of eating with the seasons. So we are a miniature version of the universe. Everything that's happening outside is happening inside of you. Okay, so if it's damp outside, you can create dampness within. If it's really dry and hot outside, you can become very dry and warm inside. And that impacts how our body functions. So what's kind of nice is that you can start to use the seasons as a way to keep yourself in harmony with nature. Because behind every season is also what's called an element of nature. So there are 5 elements of energy, elements of nature that create the universe, and they're also within you. And you have your own unique mixture of them, which gives you your energetic constitution. So sometimes people may say like, oh, I got a whole lot of fire in me, right? They're saying that because fire is part of the energetic constitution that comes with personality traits and emotion and impulses and so on. So that when you watch each of the seasons, each season has its own personality, so to speak. And it teaches us what we're designed to do. Like certain times of the year, say spring is coming around very soon. Spring is all about new beginnings, right? So in the winter, even if it's really hot where you live, in the winter is still a time where there's a sense of hibernation. There's a sense of a new year is just starting. You're contemplating what you want to create in the new year. And then the spring comes around and you're like, let's get this happening, right? Like, so there's more action being taken in the spring. You can watch nature as it buds even more, and all the animals are going to surface more. There's, everything is starting to just grow. And so are you. So you can watch that and then also eat the foods that align with each of them, because the certain foods that you eat align with the certain elements and natures. So that's one of the ways that I'm able to bring some of the old school ancient teachings in, and it's incredibly helpful to people because you can always just look out that window and connect and say, here I am, and it's always there to guide you.
So with the clients that you work with, for example, if I'm a client that came to you with adrenal fatigue, I'd love for you to just kind of run us through a process of where do you even start, because I'm extremely highly strung. I probably drink coffee, 3 cups of coffee a day. Where do you even start?
Yeah, so it would start with us having some very long conversations, me asking you a lot of questions that you may feel are just unrelated to what I'm asking, but everything is connected. So I'm going to ask you questions that tap into not just what you may be physically experiencing, but also different emotional elements, personality things. I will look into the elements that are behind you. I'll also explore your chakras, which are the energy centers that link you back to your universal consciousness. So I go through a detailed conversation with you. And then I'm able to design something that's going to work for you. But if someone comes to me with adrenal fatigue, they may be exhausted all the time, wired and tired. Their muscles are always sore. They're kind of moody. Maybe their digestive system is delicate. So the first things I would need to do is to get them on practices to calm their HPA stress axis. So they're going to be meditating. They're going to be doing different reflective exercises. They're going to shift the way they exercise if necessary, depending on what they're doing. Because sometimes we think we're doing what we should, and we're more in excess in exercise, and the intensity is too high and the recovery is too short. So it's a mixture, and shifting their foods to nurture their digestive system. And then I don't know, I'd have to see if your energy is flowing or if it's stagnant. So understand that it's that personal when we take a holistic nutrition view, that it's not about saying I would do this for somebody who has adrenal fatigue, because none of us have adrenal fatigue for the same reason. But it would still bring up conversations about what are your daily thoughts? Are you meditating? How's your exercise? Do you sleep? What kind of food are you eating? How are you eating that food? Are you eating it in the car from one job to the next job? Are you sitting in a relaxed environment with people you enjoy? Do you eat across from someone you despise? All of that makes a difference. Believe it or not, the entire eating environment impacts all this. So I would start to tweak around how you eat, how you manage your day, how you have a morning routine, or if you don't, we're creating one. So that you walk out that door every day as that new person that you want to be. So it's more about not just holistic nutrition, but more about holistic living. It's about creating a personalized lifestyle just for you.
Yeah, you mentioned how exercise could be done either excessively to meet certain needs that someone might have. How can someone determine if they're doing it just, to push themselves and see how far they can go, or when it becomes maybe detrimental to their holistic health?
Yeah, you can start to recognize the difference, because you will start to be, your recovery time between exercise bouts won't be the same anymore, right? So when you go into your next time to exercise, you don't run as fast, you can't lift as much, you get tired, you're sore. You may be able to develop an itis, so a tendinitis, a bursitis, right? It happens all the time because what's happening is a low grade of inflammation is happening in your body. You also just don't sleep so great. You're wired and tired, and you're always pushing, but you're never really satisfied. Okay, and that's a key one, is you're always, like you could be in the middle of training for a marathon and you're already on the computer signing up for your next marathon. You haven't even ran that one and you're already ahead looking for where you're going to get your next fix. Does that make sense? Or if you're trying to accomplish something in, I don't know, some type of like lifting competition, right? So you're trying to lift a certain amount of weight and maybe it's just something within you and you're already looking 10 steps ahead. Well, after I do that, I'm going to do this. Like you're not in the present moment. You're not using it in a way that's holistically nurturing you. You're using it to distract yourself from your life. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned being in the present moment. Maybe you can share what's the effect of being in the present moment on our health or well-being.
Oh my goodness. That's where life happens. In the present moment, okay? So if we are not in the present moment, we're in yesterday's story, right? And you know those stories are rolling around in your head and you're talking about things that happened like 15 years ago. Those people aren't even in your life anymore and you're still talking about it like it happened yesterday. Or you're just creating stories about what may happen, right? We've all been there. We create stories about scenarios about what may happen. We even get angry at people and the story didn't even happen. They're not even in the room, you know? So we've all been there. When you're present, you are right 100% exactly where you are. You can't even think of other things. If we're here having this conversation, you are 100% here with me. You're not in the background with the TV flickering. You're not in the background checking your phone to see who texts you. You're not in the background going, oh, I gotta go get detergent from the store. Oh my God, did Sam pay that bill? But you're not, right? But that's what happens. You're not here. I need you to be here. Because when you're present, that's when the quantum world reaches you, by the way. That's when things are delivered to you. Otherwise, if you're not in the present moment, things that can happen for you go swishing right by because you didn't even see them because you're not here. Okay, so life happens in the present moment only. So that when you are just here, it also is incredibly calming because you're not in anybody else's story, but right here. How can this not be calming? We're engaged in a fun conversation. We're learning. It's inspiring. That's what being in the present is about. And that's the ticket to all of our troubles going away, by the way, is getting in the present moment. So we use all these different tools to help us along the way.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And I would love to find out how you came about even exploring these topics, like your personal story behind this journey that you're on.
Yeah, it's been such an amazing journey. And what's fun about it is that as you just go through each door, others just keep opening for you if you remain present, that you don't need to force anything, that it just becomes available and things just fall into place. So I had been in the health and wellness industry for quite some time, and then I was teaching, to my best capacity of what I thought was sound nutrition, and doing my thing. I was working as an exercise physiologist in therapeutic settings, and I got sick. And when I went and I ended up in the hospital and test after test and everything, they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with me. So after many, many tests, I kind of decided to shift and go in a different direction. And some friends in my life said, well, why don't you try some Eastern teachings? And I thought, what are you talking about? Because you have to understand, I grew up as a very heavy science mind. I'm a biochemistry major, so it was very linear. It was classical physics. Everything needed to be in a structured, predictable manner because that's the scientific inquiry that I was, used to. So, but I needed to do something, and I was struggling with my hormones, and I had debilitating anxiety. Now I was having some heart issues. I had asthma had developed. I just had a lot of things going on. couldn't figure out exactly what to do to get away from it. So I ended up going to see an acupuncturist. That was my first experience. And, and when it was just wild, because I'm like, you're going to poke me with what? You're moving my chi? Whose chi? Like, what are you talking about? Because I never even understood energy past energy in classical physics equations. So when he started telling me about this subtle energy and stuff, I was like, wow, that's good. And being kind of a nerd, I was a little intrigued at the same time. And he helped me tremendously. And we went through my nutrition as well. And I said, no, I eat well. I mean, what are you talking about? This is what I do for a living. And he's like, and he laughed at me. He goes, no, you eat well from a Western perspective, but no, it's not. So then he started teaching me things. And I said, oh, what do you mean foods have energetic natures and all this stuff? And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. So I followed his guidelines and I started to improve drastically. And then I went and had my first experiences with yoga, with meditation and breath work. And I was just like, oh my God, where has this been all my life? Where has all of these tools been? I could have been doing this 20 years ago. I wasn't clearly open to it then, but it was just magical how it all unfolded. So I ended up going back for my PhD in holistic nutrition because it wasn't easy to get access to this type of information in such a Western science world. And it just changed everything for me. So as I was teaching and working with clients, I'd throw a little holistic in there and people would go, oh, what's that? And there was this curiosity and I'm like, oh. So as everything just kind of progressed in a gradual sense, it wasn't like I cut off everything from my Western world because I haven't. I've just kind of pruned or shifted it in a different context. I didn't just exclude the information. So my knowledge is just kind of branched in many directions. And that's why when I speak, you'll hear me talk from different directions because it just pulled me in all these and all of them are connected. So I sit here today in this incredible world of quantum physics, in this incredible world of the magic of yoga and meditation and the energy in our life, and to be able to bring a spiritual essence to such a science-driven world. And I know that that's part of my purpose of being here, is to share that because it's absolutely magical. And if someone like myself can heal, then anybody can, because I had so many ailments and debilitating anxiety, and even way before that, I was a drinker, a smoker, a fast food eater. Come on, I was 20 just like everyone else. So if I can be in this space, anyone can. It's a progression of your soul. It's not a quick fix. So don't worry about taking all of this in this one conversation. Just understand that there are possibilities and opportunities out there, and all you have to do is grab one little strand, and then the others will approach you when you're ready. So if you simply just start to meditate, another opportunity to learn about this will happen. If you just start to look at your food a little bit energetically by maybe looking at warming and cooling foods, then another opportunity will come to you. So just think of it as building blocks, because this was decades of my life. It wasn't just a blink and here I sit where I am. And that's what we need to share with everyone, is that this is the progression and evolution of your soul, not a program that you need to quick so you can go back to the life that you know.
I love it. I mean, it's transformation from the inside out. As we look at the internet at transformations, everything is marketed for 30 days, 60, 90 days, but we all know that it may take years, it may take decades for you to really fully evolve as a person. One aspect that you brought up earlier, on sleep, what other strategies could you share to improve sleep quality and have proper quality restorative sleep, like deep REM sleep? Because I know some people wake up 5-6 times a night. I wake up 2 to 3 times a night.
Why do you think you wake up 2 to 3 times a night?
I think partly it's probably just the temperature of the room, maybe the bed, possibly.
Okay. It's funny how we immediately want to look outside ourselves as to why we may wake up. My suggestion would be for you to meditate, because if your mind is calm and quiet, you will sleep deeply throughout the entire night. Okay, so if you are not able to get into those alpha and then theta waves, and theta waves, brain waves, is where we're having that REM sleep, and then deep sleep of delta, which is where our body restores, but there's no dreaming happening, is because you are all the way still in what are called your beta brain waves. There's a way too much going on up there. So my thing would be is for you to meditate, and it can simply be a starting of 10 minutes a day, and then finding different mindful activities. Something as simple as an eating meditation. Take a few nuts, a few red grapes, and mindfully eat them. So it's going to take you over a minute to eat 2 grapes, because that's how slow you're going to eat them and go through the process, because it puts you in the present moment. The more you're in that present moment, which just brings it right back to that, the deeper you're going to sleep.
Yeah, I find that whole conversation is so eye-opening in the sense there's so many more factors beyond just that nutritional aspect or the fitness aspect that play a role. And seeing your own personal story or hearing about it, it's fascinating. I'm sure you can also share a lot of stories that your clients would have experienced. And maybe you can just share, like what's possible once you take a holistic approach to nutrition and your whole life.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with many people and they've all had different experiences. We have regulated diabetes and been taken off of meds, reversed heart disease, have gotten rid of insomnia, shrunk fibroids to they're no longer detectable, removed anxiety and depression, which is huge because when your state of mind is not where it needs to be, nothing else is. So you can see some powerful changes, weight loss that actually stays off for years, to balancing those hormones and getting rid of that adrenal fatigue. Any physical ailment that you have can be taken back through this holistic process of looking at things physically, energetically, and spiritually. You just have to be open to the journey.
I love that. And maybe like as a last tip for someone, like they're in the office, the boss comes in, it's, like haywire, and all of a sudden they're stressed out. How can they catch themselves before they're stressed out and emotionally wired up to come back to a calmer state?
Sometimes we just need to have something that we can focus on that works for us. And one thing that you can always have is your breath. So I would say, there's plenty of other things, but that's the quickest thing, is to go to your breath. And there are certain types of breathing techniques. My personal one, my favorite is Ujjayi breath, which is called victory breath. And it is a certain type of breathing that allows you to not only keep yourself alert, but also to calm your nervous system. So I would have people doing a particular breathing exercise that's a little bit more emphasized because it pulls you back into that present moment. So you're not just listening to perhaps your boss's banter, right? And you can just say, okay, regroup, and then you could make a more appropriate response to whatever needs to be said. Otherwise, if we get caught up in that, we go into our survival brain. And you know what happens then? We say things we wish we could take back, right? Because we just get impulsive and we get egoic because we're not operating from our soul anymore. We're just very egoic, and now we're on the defense, and it's not pretty, right? And we want to keep our job. So breathing always works, so, people sometimes take an affirmation. There's different things that people can do to draw themselves in. And some people carry stones, some people, whatever it may be that reminds you, like, okay, Teri, back, get present. Some people just say the word shift. Some people say change the story. So whatever it is that you need to do just to pull yourself back to where you are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Always before you respond. That's all I have to say is take a breath before you respond, always.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Teri.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thank you. We hope you've got a lot of value and inspiration from this presentation. For live Q&As and updates on the summit, join our Facebook group. You'll find the link below. Our goal is to reach 1 million people and help them become plant-fit inspirations in their communities. We believe that the right food and exercise can change your life, inspire those around you, and save the planet. Feel the same? Then check out our Plant Fit for Life package. Click the button below for more information and incredible bonuses by our experts. This is Toby and Luke signing off from the Plant Fit Summit, and see you for the next presentation.